Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, and what price range will the dollars make sense for the Red Raiders and a new head coach, and also a courageous NCAA tournament conversation next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks again for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. I'm still a little emotional. Happy NCAA Tournament opening day. I do not acknowledge the first four in or the play-ins or any of that junk as the NCAA Tournament. No. This, what we're about to process, depending upon when you're listening to this episode, is the NCAA Tournament. So happy NCAA Tournament Day to those who celebrate. Chris Level, Casey Cowan with you. Not celebrating quite like we would in some other years, Chris, as we are only neutral, I suppose, observers in this year's tournament. And we'll get to some very neutral and unbiased thoughts on the Big 12 Conference in the lay of the land coming up on this episode. But this is one of the greatest sports days of the year. So even if my guys aren't involved, I can't go without acknowledging that. Chris, I have friends who take this day off a year in advance. I mean, it is more sacred than their child's baptism day, I think, in some cases. And I'm not going to name who that is because he might get in trouble with the wife if she listens to the show. But what a day, man. What a day to be alive. Happy March Madness. Good to see you again.
Yeah, man. Day sports are fun sports, man, especially when you get them in the weekdays. And this Thursday and Friday that we're about to endure is about as good as it gets because it's meaningful sports. It's all day long, about a 12 to 14-hour window. I love it. And and you mentioned that. It's what's weird is that I was sitting there thinking, like, it's been a minute since I've been able to just be at home and kind of, enjoy it as just a general fan because four of the last 6 years we've been in the tournament. And then one of those, there was no tournament, obviously. And then there was another year where I didn't actually travel with the team, but we did broadcast the games because that was whenever they were kind of in the bubble known as Indianapolis and trying to operate that way when all that tournament, right, kind of happened. But yeah, it's, being in San Diego last year and then San Francisco. I mean, it's just a wild ride, man. And it's like you can feel the tension when you're in those buildings. You see these teams you've watched on TV that happen to get dropped in your region as well. You pass each other in the hallway. I mean, it's just freaking awesome. But it's also fun to sit back and either be at home with your favorite beverage or be in somewhere like Las Vegas or somewhere and consume it. And watch it and all those things and kind of follow the madness that way. But man, it's fun stuff, man. And it's it's really all weekend. I mean, it doesn't stop on Friday night. I mean, Saturday and Sunday are legit as well. But yeah, I mean, it starts today.
So hopefully you've made appropriate plans for the next 48 hours or so, and you are nowhere near your office as you're taking this in, or maybe leaving the office taking this in as we get ready for tip-off. We'll get back to tournament thoughts as it relates to the league at large coming up in just a moment. But first, as for what we are focusing on in the 806, we're looking for somebody to want us. We want to be wanted. Head coaching thoughts still on our minds, and we had an interesting conversation yesterday as it related to the timeline at that time. Maybe conversations happening here or there. Who could be a more serious mention as far as names that you've probably heard out there? Maybe who isn't so much someone with stock behind that name. Check out that episode if you missed it yesterday on Locked On Texas Tech. You can get it on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. But wanted to come at it from another angle that I thought was just as interesting today, Chris. And I totally understand if most college basketball fans or Texas Tech fans out there have not a whole lot of familiarity with what we're about to get into because, well, why would you? Salary talk coming at you. 3, 2, 1. You brought to me a list of Big 12 head coaching salaries, national head coaching salaries as it relates to college basketball. And I've got to say, in some ways, I'm a little surprised whenever I see these numbers in front of me because I don't know. I guess I just have some concept of what I think most are paying their guys or where Texas Tech is, where could they be or should they be, with the next guy. But you may kind of lose track of maybe where some of these numbers actually lie. So we'll get to some of the numbers here, Chris, but I'm curious as you saw some of these come across, what was it that was kind of catching your attention, either within the Big 12 or maybe across the country otherwise?
I think we get so caught up into what football coaches make and what coordinators make that you kind of think it's very similar in basketball, and it's just not. It's not there. I think that there are some examples to the contrary, but I just don't. I think people start thinking, that college basketball coaches are getting paid like some of the top college football coaches, and that's just not the case. There are a variety of football coaches out there that make way more than the highest paid college basketball coach, and I think that when Tech fans sit there and they start to figure out, okay, your next coach, what you can afford, what would it take cost wise, and all these different things. I think it's important to kind of look at some of these lists, and we'll put it up here in a second. But because I think that, there it is right there.
If you're watching on YouTube,
there it is right there. And I think as you look at, because I think Texas Tech was willing to pay.
But first, today's episode brought to you by America's #1 sports book, FanDuel. And now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app. Become a new customer because new customers get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't hit. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. Safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line, point scores, 3 points drained if basketball is your thing, or all points in between. Underwater basket weaving, anyone. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with that same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
I think Texas Tech was willing to pay Chris Beard in the $6 million range before he ultimately left. That they never came to that agreement. I don't think that's exactly what Chris wanted to do, but I can't say that that's exactly what Texas Tech wanted to do as well. But I think it gives you an idea that if Texas Tech had the right fit, that they would be willing to pay. So, it's also important to note that, Joey McGuire, this is just an important context here. Joey McGuire will ultimately make, in the low $4 million range, I think, like on average salary. Okay. I think it's important to note, I don't think Texas Tech is willing to pay their basketball coach more than their football coach, unless it's somebody that is like, you're University of Houston right now, you are in the NBA right now, one of those kinds of candidates that are just no-brainer, street cred galore. They are crushing it wherever they're at, or have crushed it, and have championships on the resume at that point. So
I can't even think like who that would be.
Exactly.
I think you'd have to get like local skins on the wall first before you could even you'd really have to come to. It's possible to see that happen, I suppose, and maybe we were near that as you made a run to a national title game while your football program stunk simultaneously. But I think you got to come. I don't even know who that could be. Like James Naismith, dig him up, and maybe he's the one. But otherwise, you got to be here and you got to be doing something, I think, before that's even a consideration. And there's probably plenty across the state of Texas, the South, or whatever, where that's going to hold true as well.
And so I get the point is that, $3 to $4 million per year, that seems to be tops. That seems to be as high as you would go on paying somebody. Again, it all just depends on who it is and what you had to do to get them and what their contract was, where they're at. Do they have a buyout? How many other people were interested in all those things? But I just don't see you going higher than anywhere near like the $4 million range, unless this person, because if you're looking at the list here, $4 million is that's top 10 in the country, we can agree or disagree on whether some of the guys on this list. I know that top 10 nationally list, every one of those guys is in the NCAA tournament this year. I think that is important to note. So everybody is in fact in the tournament. And I think that if you look at the Big 12 list, Cowan, that Jerome Tang, list right there at 2.1, that's going to be significantly higher, whether it's Kansas State or somebody else paying him. That's going to be significantly higher than that. And, and you were willing to pay Mark Adams after an extension in the $3 million range, and that was after a Sweet 16 performance. So I think you kind of have an idea of what you may be willing to pay here. And I don't think you're trying to save money or you're trying to not spend money. I think it's all about if it's justified or not. And I think Texas Tech has proven repeatedly, if we find the right person and we like what we're getting, whether it be fit or on the court or field, we will pay this person handsomely. In fact, we will come to them and say, rip up that previous contract. We got a new one for you, because this is what they did with Mark. This is what they did with Joey just now. And so I think it kind of gives you an idea on some context about what money you can afford. But again, so to clean it up, I don't think you're going to end up paying more than your football coach unless it's somebody that is just, like extremely well established. And I also don't think you're going to get too much higher than what you were paying Mark, fresh off of a Sweet 16 performance, and who was very experienced. So again, some of this is going to be. So I think it's fair to say you will spend somewhere between $2.5 to $4 million. Is there a sweet spot there, depending on who this person is? So I just thought it was interesting context, because I think I learned. Looking at these lists just like you did, Callan.
Yeah, I was interested by a couple of different things, but first, to start with kind of the realm you were in there from a Texas Tech perspective, if I'm reading what you're saying correctly, it kind of sounds like, though, you could go either way. It's not that you're trying to bargain hunt or that you only want to come back up the truck for somebody. It's like, yeah, for the right fit, we might be willing to give a bigger number than some would anticipate. But also at the same time, what you're describing there, where Texas Tech has historically been, where they were most recently with Mark Adams, does, I think, give you some indication, like you said, maybe a 2 to 4 kind of range of where the most likely landing spot is. Beyond Texas Tech, I was pretty interested to see and somewhat surprised that you didn't wind up with more Big 12 head coaches on the top 10 national list. Now, I don't have it reflected here nationally as I do on the Big 12 list if you're watching on YouTube, but Chris Beard would have been within that top 10, so that would have been another Big 12. That would have been 3, Self, Beard, and Huggins, that would have made the top 10. But I can't help but notice old Scott Drew sitting there, 3.7, national title on the resume, would not be in the top 10. And as we're sitting here talking about, hey, Texas Tech 2 to 4, it's just ringing in my mind like, what if you land here with the guy that's going to be making more in year one than a guy who's got a national title? That just seems kind of odd to me. And maybe there's some monies that don't go reported in these figures for a school like Baylor. I'm sure there is to some degree for all these guys.
Yeah.
But that one did stand out to me. Scott Drew there at 3.7 mil, Jamie Dixon at 3.5. That rounds out the top 5 if you're not watching this on YouTube. But what a great incentive to watch us on YouTube.
Yeah, Scott Drew deserves every penny that he's paid. But again, I just think when people start, you start tossing around numbers and all that, I just think you can get a really good coach for not near as much money as maybe people were thinking and you can, you're in a position to, I think, pay handsomely here. And it's also worth noting too, what you don't have context here on when you're looking at these lists, and is that I think that who you surround, your head coach with, and how much money you put into a salary pool. Because I think that Texas
That's
Tech
a great point. Yeah.
they used to be way behind there, and I think that is an important component too, because you've got to. I mean, that's where we see these salaries really kind of dipping over, is like we see coordinators in the football realm. Okay, like those salaries are rising rapidly. We, both of Texas Tech's coordinators are right at $1 million on multi-year contracts. Okay. And I think that was unheard of years and years ago, especially for a school like Texas Tech, but they're right there in the thick of it now. And I think it's important to note that, like, associate head coaches and just some of those pieces that will sit next to the head coach are key cogs in your machine. And there needs to be some serious budget for people like that too. Because again, this league, I mean, everybody's, again, pushing their chips to the middle of the table. I mean, this league is brutal. And everybody's got you just look at what Houston's doing. And I think even the BYUs, the Central Floridas, and the Cincinnatis, they are not going to be like a pushover by any means. They're not going to be like some gimme. And then you look at it like a school like Oklahoma. I mean, that's Porter Moser was a Final Four coach. We remember Sister Jean. I mean, they're rocking it out at Illinois, Chicago. They're just the Final Four appearance and all that stuff. And he is struggling in Norman right now. And that's a guy that went to the Final Four. Okay. But it's hard, okay, in this league. If you don't have the recruiting component, the fit component, the support, and they have no support there. I don't think he's recruited like crazy. But they're stellar, man. I mean, Oklahoma State missed on the tournament this year, but Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma 3 times. I mean, that's like, it was Bedlam, and it was Oklahoma State 3 up, 3 down. I mean, so I just think that, and I only bring that up to say, just because like you've been to a recent Final Four, that doesn't necessarily translate. It's all about where you are now, what your landscape is, what your league is. Can you get it going? You have any familiarity with what you're doing? But yeah, Porter Moser, I mean, I don't think they're exactly happy in Norman with him. And I think he's a great guy, and everybody would tell you he's a really good coach. It's just not working there yet.
Yeah, since that Final Four roughly 5 or 6 years ago, who could have predicted at that time with Sister Jean 110 then that the next 5 years are going to be easier for her than for Moser? I mean, that's just really wild kind of to consider. Did you see Sister Jean this year? Did you see her on TV already?
No.
The advancements in modern science have not come to Sister Jean's doorstep. She's just doing it all natural. I'm thinking, I don't know, cigarettes and Coca-Cola Classic. Sweet thoughts out to Sister Jean. Chris, I don't know. I don't know exactly if I don't know what the qualifications need to look like exactly as far as skins on the wall. I mentioned on a show yesterday that I did feel like a presence in Texas, familiarity with Texas, these recruiting grounds, and obviously, hopefully, some success within those stops. Something I really want to see there. But you're exactly right when you talk about, well, this guy makes a run to a Final Four, and he also went to a Sweet 16. A couple years later, or this guy does this guy does that, is no guarantee whatsoever. And I'm sure many of you are already aware of this, but no guarantee whatsoever that you're going to see that translate into a new stop. It is about the fit, the word that you're probably tired of hearing us say by now, but continue to hammer that, because it's what's there for those to decide that are in charge of making this decision, right? They have to be the ones, because they're the only ones sitting across the table from these guys, looking them in the eye, talking to them one-on-one. They have to be the ones that determine, yes, I think this piece does fit, or I think maybe regardless of previous success, you could have some challenges with this guy at Texas Tech. And yeah, Moser is a great example of that. And who knows what the future is going to hold as he goes to a lesser league where maybe he can be a 2 seed in a conference tournament like Texas A&M as well. Anything is possible if the Aggies are doing it. I just tell you that. Chris, thanks for allowing me to squeeze in a shot at the Aggies there before we pivot to another topic of conversation. This one I'm actually getting kind of excited about now because it's going to give us an example to show the audience how stunning and brave we are as sports fans. We're going to talk about an event we love and one that didn't allow our team to participate in it. It's going to take some courage. That's next on Locked On Texas Tech. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech a part of your day, whenever, wherever, however you're making it happen. We appreciate being your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Hope you'll make Locked On College Basketball's March Madness Bracket Breakdown your second listen on the Locked On College Basketball podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. With Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan, coming at you from west of the 100th Meridian, where it's really going down. And Chris, we come to you as neutral observers of the NCAA tournament here today, still celebrating the season very much so as sports fans. It is a cherished time of the year, and I won't deny that, even though our guys aren't in it. But the league has a heavy presence, as you anticipate, with the Big 12 Conference having the regular season that it does. And I was curious, Chris, as you travel around the league calling Texas Tech basketball, you've seen all these teams up close and personal. I was curious to get some of your perspectives on the lay of the land as it relates to the tournament and the Big 12's chances possibly of replicating some regular season success now within the postseason. So let's get to that. And I'm also curious maybe if you have thoughts on landing spots for some, or some of maybe who didn't find themselves in the field that had an expectation to. How'd you process how the dust settled for the Big 12 as it relates to the big dance?
Well, I think that, getting 7 teams in was a given. I think that and the lowest of those seeds were a 9 seed, just to give you an idea how loaded this league was. I mean, you get 7 in, and the lowest seeded team is a 9 seed. I mean, you have a 1, you have, let's see here, you have a 2 seed, you have a couple of 3 seeds, you have a couple of 6 seeds, which I think – we'll get to those 6 seeds here in a minute, but I think one of those has a chance to really make some serious noise. The other one may technically be a bit overrated, but still the league got a lot of credit. And then I don't mind saying it. I think Oklahoma State at 8-10 in this league, I was really surprised that they did not make it in it. And I know that the committee chair indicated that, well, they had 18 quad 1 opportunities and they only won 6 of them. So they went 6-12 in quad 1 games, and they put NC State in this tournament and they had 1 quad 1 win. So that part doesn't really.
Idiotic.
Yeah.
That explanation irritated me, Chris, because now all of a sudden they were pivoting to, I don't know how many people even noticed or cared, but now all of a sudden there was some pivot to, well, you had too many opportunities to win challenging games. You played too tough. What?
Yeah.
Right,
it's whatever.
The same way you did.
What kind of argument you want to pull out that helps your agenda or your case in that particular conversation. But I thought they would sneak in there. I wouldn't have been surprised if they would have been sent to Dayton in one of the first 4 scenarios, or just barely gotten in. But I thought that they had done enough. I just think if you put Oklahoma State in, or Texas Tech when they were playing as good as they were in February, and some of these other leagues, they're finishing in the top half of those leagues. I just think the league was that good this year. But again, they didn't make it. I think, there's some, after having done this for several years and being around it, I think that the common theme always is that when you get into the tournament, the first game of these settings is always the hardest. Okay. And while the team on paper could be much more difficult, the second game, it's the first one that is always the trickiest and the hardest, because teams have had time to prepare. They have scouted you. It's quick turnaround, from first to second game. And so it kind of equals everything. But the first one, that's where all the upsets happen typically. And I think that the Big 12 is going to have a really big spotlight on it this year because everybody talked about it so glowingly and all those things. And this is going to be pointed out a gazillion times. The last 3 title games, okay, have either been won by a Big 12 team or featured a Big 12 team. And that includes the Red Raiders and obviously Baylor winning it and then Kansas winning it. And then there was the 1 year in there where there was no tournament. So that's the last, 3 title games have featured a Big 12 team with 2 of those 3 teams winning the title. And Texas Tech could have done the same if you foul up 3, but I digress.
Don't go there, Chris. Don't go there. Don't rev that engine. Don't rev that engine.
So people will be looking to see if Kansas can repeat. I think they have a tough road. They kind of got taken out of the region where I think that they thought they were going to be in. I think everybody thought they were going to be in Des Moines in Kansas City, I think in the second round. That's not, I don't think on the table for them. They got sent out west. But I think I think there'll be a lot of spotlight on these teams. And I do think, I will say this, there is some upset potential here for some of these Big 12 teams. And here's the way I'll leave this, the caveat. If you get past the first game, some of these Big 12 teams are going to stay a while. However, I mean, it's a 40-minute pop, man. And, depending on who you are up against and if a team's just shooting it hot from deep, look out because we see it every year. There are the years where we get chalk and there's just not a lot of drama. But there are some years where, you better be careful because there's more parity now than there ever has been before because of the portal. You don't see these teams that are in this deal that have, wow, man, they got a bunch of freshmen starting. No, everybody's got older guys and upperclassmen and seniors because they've gone to recruit them from the portal if they didn't already have them. So I think that's important to know. Now, we can go through some of these games if you want to because I'm excited to talk about them.
I'm just thinking as you said that right there, I'm like, okay, who doesn't have that kind of team? And I was like, oh, us. Where are we? Oh, yeah, we're not. Yeah. So I guess if you do it one way, you may be there with that kind of, and you're exactly right, man. That's a great point. We always learn of this player here, that player there that's wearing a jersey you never heard of. I saw a jersey this week that said something like Farley Dickinson. I think that's just a prank somebody's playing on us. But you'll learn of these, these players that are out there and can really ball. And yeah, probably never more so before than now. Do you have that more widespread? And there'll be guys here that are obviously being learned about for the first time by some of us that are playing for opportunities on bigger stages and bigger leagues next time around with the transfer portal at their disposal. But yeah, let's take a walk through here real quick, these Big 12 daisies and some of what you see breaking down, because I am interested in you talking upset possibilities here for some.
Yeah, so I'll go through these one at a time. Kansas, Howard, that's a 116 game. Bill Self returns to the bench. Kansas will I think, be fine there. I think it's Kevin McCullough did not play in Kansas's last game at the Big 12 championship, and Texas worked them over in front of 16,000, 17,000 Jayhawk fans. I would expect them to bounce back. Iowa State and Pitt, this is one that it's not going to surprise me. And Pitt just wins on a missed buzzer beater, in Dayton, Ohio against Mississippi State. And this is a Friday game. Excuse me. This is a Thursday game here. So this one will be played today. But this is a game where I just don't think Iowa State's been playing very well lately. I looked this up. They started out 13-2 on the season. They're 6-11 since then. Here's the other stat. They are 1-7 versus everybody except for Baylor. Okay. In the last 5 weeks. So they, for whatever reason, they just are an ideal matchup versus Baylor. They beat them 3 times. It just doesn't compute. Baylor is really good. I think Iowa State is pretty good, but I just would have thought Baylor would have figured out a way to, it's hard to beat a team 3 times, but other than Baylor, Iowa State just hasn't beaten a lot of teams in recent weeks. Plus, they lose Caleb Grill. And the thing about those Dayton winners is that one of those teams, I think, has always won a tournament game, I think, every year that they've had it. So somebody comes out of that Dayton deal and they pull off some game in the tournament. I think there's a stretch of it's either almost every year or every year. And so, Pitt could be the team this year. We'll keep a close eye on it. Kansas State.
Well, it's kind of like a run and start, Chris.
Yes, I agree.
For the winner of that game, like you get a little mo, you've seen some shots fall, you're feeling good. Yeah, got a little momentum going into that one.
And I'll never forget when we were, I think this was I guess this would have been the Final Four run. Okay, that year we were in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we had already gotten to Tulsa. And we had been there for a day or two, and a team from Dayton was also – they were on the other side of the bracket, or the other part of the regional that was there. They weren't necessarily – we weren't going to deal with them, but they happened to be staying at the same hotel. And we were there, and I think getting breakfast or whatever, one of the morning before the game or whatever, and they had gotten in like at 4 a.m. from Dayton, Ohio, and then they were going to have to start practices and all those things. But you're just riding the wave at that point, and they were going to have to play, the next day, and it's just like on no rest, no sleep. You're flying in, but this is the part of it. So you want those first round buys if you can, I guess, and not be one of those teams in Dayton. But Kansas State and Montana State. The Bobcats, I think, versus the old Emaw and Jerome Tang's bunch. I think Montana State, I looked this up, they lost to Oregon by 30 and Arizona by 21 in the non-conference. They have won 14 of their last 15 games. I think Kansas State handles their business here. I think they'll be in good shape. I just think they're deeper. Where Kansas State's going to get into problems is if they face a really quality post or group of post players that really dominate on the glass. Keontae, Johnson is an undersized, kind of big. I think a lot of Kansas State size steps outside and really shoots threes. So there's not a lot of skilled size there for Kansas State on the interior. And then they've got the tiniest of point guards that is really, really good. But again, size a bit of an issue there with Kansas State, but they'll survive that one. And you just stop me anytime, or I'll just keep rambling. Cowan, do you have anything you want?
No, keep rolling.
Okay. West Virginia and Maryland. I think this is a fascinating matchup. The winner gets 1 seed Bama, and I think Eric Stevenson playing about as well as anybody in the country. I mean, when the Red Raiders played West Virginia last week, this is a cat that had scored, and he's the one that popped off about the Red Raiders when they upset him in Morgantown. But he had, I think, a stretch of 5 or 6 games of 23 points or more. And when I watched him, against the Red Raiders up close in Kansas City last week, he was still very much dialed in. I think he broke the streak. I don't think he went for 23, but he was just on fire and just making shots from everywhere, just dialed in. And so I think it'll be interesting to see kind of if he can carry them past the win versus Maryland. And I'm not going to be surprised, man, if they give Bama a scare either, just because of everything that Alabama is dealing with. Alabama shoots more threes than anybody in the country, and I think they shoot them at a good percentage. But these are the teams that in this part of the year, you live by them, you'll die by them too. The Duke Blue Devils, no better example of that,
yes,
of those teams in so many years. They just come up cold one night and they're not going in, and then you start to press, and it's like, how else are we going to win? And, so plus they're going to get asked a lot of questions about some of the chaos that's been surrounding their program too. Speaking of threes. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you got to be careful if it's Bama coming in the second round, because Bama's going to be coming fully loaded. And if they don't, they got a buddy they can text. Your bracket breakdown is a little different than what my notes I've got prepared for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay, yeah. Speaking of threes, though, Texas. Now, this is a fascinating, not just game, but situation to follow here. And we can kind of localize this back to Texas Tech, I think, in some ways. So Texas will play Colgate. Okay, Colgate shoots 40%. From three. I think they lead the country as a team from deep. Okay. So again, if they're falling, look out, they're going to have to probably make 10, 11, 12 of them to give themselves a chance. But they have 4 senior starters. I think that's also important to note, does Colgate. And I think they were within 2 points of upsetting Wisconsin in last year's tournament, or it was either last year or 2 years ago. So they've been here before, some of these same guys. And so, but Texas is an interesting one because, there's a lot of questions surrounding Rodney Terry. Do they keep him? What does he have to do to keep his job? And I think that, and I've talked to various people in the industry, coaches and some national folks, and this is a fun conversation. It's a tricky one because I think there is some thought that the administration at Texas is going to be okay if Texas loses early in this tournament. Because I don't think they necessarily are looking to keep Rodney Terry on as the head coach. Now, again, that's just kind of the vibe that I get. However, if he gets to the, say, Elite Eight, I don't know how you can't keep him. Because I think the thought is, hey, look, Chris Beard built this roster. There are 6 seniors. I think that's right. I think there's 6 seniors on this roster. And what is this guy is he gonna be able to build the next wave? And I don't know if we know that he will be able to. And so I think if they lose, because imagine Rodney Terry's situation if he loses to Texas A&M of all people in the second round of this tournament. I don't think he's got any chance to keep his job personally. Now, again, I don't know what Texas knows. I don't know who they may be interested in, but I also know, does Rodney Terry become somebody that you'd be wanting to talk to if you're Texas Tech? Who does Texas want to talk to if they have a job opening? And do those searches cross over at all? Is there some of the same candidates? You follow what I'm saying? So, I think there's some different, things to note as it relates to Texas's tourney run here. And so we'll just kind of keep an eye on them. But there's some upset potential as far as a 15-2 there because Colgate can shoot it from deep really, really well. So there's that one. TCU, at the time that you and I are taping this, I don't know who that they'll play. It'll either be, I think, Nevada or Arizona State. I'll take Mike Miles. I think Mike Miles and TCU, I think they've been rolling lately after some struggles. I think they'll handle their business and at least move on to the second round. And then they would they would play Gonzaga. I think they can actually beat Gonzaga. I think Mike Miles is better than the Gonzaga guard, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Then Baylor, UC Santa Barbara. This is another one with some upset potential because Baylor is 2-4 over their last 6 games. I think Baylor is not very good on defense, at least lately. And I think, UC Santa Barbara nearly beat Creighton 2 years ago. And so I think there's some upset potential here. But again, like with some of these upset potential games, if Texas were to win or if Baylor were to win, I think, again, the first game of these settings is the hardest one. If you get past it, you can start to go on a run. So anyway, sorry for rambling, but those are my thoughts on the 6 or 7 Big 12 tournament games.
Can't wait to see how it shakes out. And for more on just that, check out Locked On College Basketball for your second listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. That took real courage, Chris, and I think we'll have to be brave in the face of this event throughout the duration of it, but excited it is time once again.
I have a question for you. So, it's a hard fact that the longer the Big 12 tournament teams stay in the tournament and the more games that the Big 12 tournament teams win, the more money that the conference gets. So some sit around and go, yeah, you root for the Big 12 teams when your team's not in it, and because it's more of a windfall for the league and that can kind of help you out. Do you even care about that? Do you sit back and root for the Big 12 teams so the league will look good? There's more money for the league, or do you sit there and root against? You tell me what your thoughts are.
It's mostly team by team, I suppose. I hope Texas is beaten by 100, preferably not by the Aggies. So that's a bit of a pickle. I don't want to see the Aggies have any success. I didn't even know that was the thing about the money until 10 seconds ago. And they're not cutting me a check, so no, I don't care about that at all. Otherwise, there are some sympathetic figures, I think. But, You could probably take a guess at the cast of characters I don't want to see have success. A lot of them coincidentally reside in the Lone Star State. So I'm about 50-50 maybe on rooting interest. How about you?
I will. I'll kind of root for some of these teams. Some of them I won't. I think that there's one of the purple teams that I'll like seeing do well. One of them I won't want to see do well. It's not easy to, or not hard to figure out that. I think that the purple team that I'll root for resides in a state with another school that wears, blue and had a, coach that was missing some games recently. I wish that they lose every game that they play. I worked with many folks that attended the University of Kansas. Casey, you know some of these people. And I would say that I wish that Kansas wasn't even allowed to be in the tournament, much less do I want to see them succeed when they are in it. So, yeah, I'll be rooting against them. And probably I'll probably be rooting against TCU as well, So anyway, but that's just me, man.
I could have pegged you for that one.
that's just me. And again, the Texas situation is fascinating because I could see that if you really wanted Texas basketball to do poorly going on in the future, depending on what your thought process is here, you may want them to win a bunch of games here. Whereas if you are scared about what they may do, you may be rooting for them to lose early and then, to win, I should say. I don't want to confuse myself here, because if they win and they keep him, maybe you're like, okay, well, I'm not really worried about Texas and all that. But if they lose early, then they may go get somebody that you wanted or go, oh, geez, I don't want to deal with this guy. Being in the state. So who knows what's going to happen there, but I think it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing it play out. And man, there are a lot of things within what you just described there, obviously, that, like you're saying, could impact Texas Tech that I really haven't even been considering. So a whole lot to keep an eye on. Chris, thanks for the insights and the time as always, man. Enjoyed it.
Enjoy the madness, people. Keep hope alive. The Red Raiders will be back soon, man. So it's I know it's a party without us right now, but it won't last for a long time. But anyway, enjoy the day sports. Enjoy the madness. Keep hope alive. We'll talk to you next time.
Let's hope so. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far, so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you for the next one on Locked On Texas Tech.